Jack Ma actually said he thinks this trade war could last 20 years. Obviously, Tim Cook and Jack Ma have different incentives, but how could they be, their opinions be so different?
I mean, Tim Cook has a responsibility to, I think, at some level, be optimistic about this, right? He's the chief executive of one of the world's largest companies, certainly one of the most valuable technology companies, and he has to show optimism to his investors because Apple is really at the center of this thing. They're a US-based company, right, that manufactures over 90% of its goods overseas.
Apple products were spared in this latest round of tariffs, but that doesn't mean they could be spared in upcoming rounds of tariffs. Ben, what's your take on the view from Jack Ma? 20 years?
I think he's wise to say that. I think, regardless of whether Trump is in office or not, we're going to see a continued amount of pressure from both sides of the U.S. political spectrum to change the existing relationship and dynamic between China and the United States, both on an economic and ultimately on a political level. I think he saw that folks, even say in the Hillary campaign, were also looking to reshape that relationship. And so just because Trump, for instance, loses the House in the upcoming November elections, or ultimately is not voted in 2.5 years from now, I think still this type of policy will continue indefinitely.
Meantime, the war of words continues as well. President Trump saying in a statement, "We have given China every opportunity to treat us more fairly, but so far China has been unwilling to change its practices." Meantime, the China Commerce Ministry saying, "We hope that the U.S. side will recognize the negative consequences of such acts and take convincing measures to correct them in a timely manner." Ben, who's in a better position here, the U.S. or China?
It's an interesting one. I think at the offset of this, people think, I think there was a view that China was pretty well insulated against this and ultimately had a lot of other options for trading partners. Was going to work on developing their own native industries and build consumer demand locally. But I think that they, in the short term at least, misjudged their capabilities to weather this storm. I don't think we're seeing the impacts of it yet. The A-share market has taken a dive, obviously a lot to do with deleveraging and the abolition of a lot of shadow banking institutions, but ultimately I think the effects of this will be seen about a year from now when these policies and the damage in the order books really take effect. And so I think that in the short term, the United States farmers and some of the suppliers of products into China are going to be hurting, but in the longer term, China is going to struggle, I think, with the ramifications of this, particularly if the 25% tax hits starting on January 1st.
Mark, talk to us about the impact on tech products so far and the potential impact from the additional $267 billion in goods that the president could tax and has threatened to.
So just a little history. On September 5th, Apple put out a letter indicating which products to which tariff codes could be impacted by the previous set of proposals for the $200 billion tariffs proposed by the Trump administration. And the two highlights on there were the AirPods and the Apple Watch. Those are the two most revenue-driving, profitable products on there from Apple. And then yesterday we got news, we actually broke this on Bloomberg yesterday morning, that the Apple Watch and the AirPods would no longer be affected because a certain tariff code for smartwatches, a technology-related code, had been modified to exclude those types of products. So in terms of the tech industry as a whole, anyone who makes products like smartwatches, including Fitbit, Gurman, and of course Apple and the AirPods, they caught a really big break yesterday. So that was some good news for the tech industry. In terms of the $267 billion plan that you mentioned that would be upcoming and it's still in its early development stages, there's no reason to believe that smartphones would be affected at this point. Obviously that can and will probably change depending on what the Trump administration gleans from the comments it receives from these tech companies. And it's important to note that these tech companies do have the opportunity to give their feedback, and I think that was one of the driving factors for the smartwatch tariff code to be removed yesterday.
Ben, how is this trade war being covered by Chinese state-run media and viewed by Chinese citizens?
It's an interesting one. I think that it varies depending on whether it's coming from the government or from people. Certainly, I think there's an overarching view that there is an attempt to slow Chinese development here, certainly targeting programs like China 2025, which has become a rallying cry, I think, particularly in Washington, to with some of this rhetoric stating that we're trying to prevent China from developing some of those native industries and providing a lot of our components that ultimately might be used by those companies, or IP that's being introduced to those businesses. I think there's a view that the United States is trying to stymie that growth and prevent the achievement of the Chinese dream in the long term. We're not seeing an immediate blowback in terms of Chinese consumers boycotting U.S. products, certainly nothing outright from individuals in the streets, but I think that the local government PR machine has certainly galvanized on this point. I think it's emboldened the hawks locally, who are already advocating a change in their relationship with the U.S. and advocating greater interdependence with the folks in the Belt and Road countries and new trading partners. And so I think in the short term, there's certainly a lot of very negative sentiment around the aim of this program, and much less coverage around the key talking points coming from the U.S. side around fairness and reciprocity, the need that certain institutions and WTO agreements be respected, that companies on the 301 list cease actions around IP theft and around forced technology transfer. And so quite a different message over here.